Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the International Filmmakers panel. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to do this because we're all working with different time zones here, and you all have great projects, and I'm super, super excited for this. Sally McLean will be the moderator again. We had an international panel in 2017 in New York because we had so many people fly in from around the world that year. Tricia Morison was one of them. We had Laura, who won Best Actress, who flew in from Cape Town, South Africa. And it was like all Australians. Do you remember, Tricia? There was so many of us, or you guys. And then the next 2 years was tons and tons of Canadians that just drove over the border and slept in a car. Anyways, without further ado, I am going to bring everybody in. Let me just pull up Sally. Sally, thank you so much for doing this. I will bring in the rest of the panelists. It's lovely to see you again.
You too, hon. Absolutely. It's been a while.
What time is it there in Australia?
It's 8 o'clock in the morning on Sunday.
Thank you. I'm glad we didn't make it 2 p.m. or something.
Yes, I am grateful for that as well. Yes, indeed.
All right. I am going to take myself out and bring everyone else in, okay?
Great.
And then I'll let you guys introduce. Give me one sec. Thanks, guys.
Look at all these faces. Hello, everybody. Good morning from Melbourne, from the future. I think the best thing for us to do, I know I'm not the only Australian on this call, so, I can't actually claim that as being just me. But I think the best thing we should do, first thing we should probably do is actually do an introduction so that people know, not obviously we have your lovely names there, but also what series you are a part of, and also where you are in the world at the moment. So I'm going to go according to what I can see on the screen, which I'm pretty sure is hopefully what's reflected also for everybody else's screen. So Ethan, can we start with you? Whereabouts are you based and what series are you working with? And just, give us a little postcard snapshot of your background as well.
Sure. I'm a writer, creator. I'm based in Toronto, Canada, and I'm the creator of the series Cam Girlfriend. That's the quick.
Excellent. I love it. We'll talk obviously more about the series. So I will go across now to Saul and say, whereabouts are you, sir, at the moment?
In London. So I'm the opposite of you. It's now 9 o'clock at night. So it's, it's a better time. But I'm a writer and producer, director, and also actor. And the series is Chantelle Psychic PD Night Division. It's a bit of a mouthful.
Yes, but memorable because I suspect.
Fingers crossed.
Absolutely. Great. Now, Ahmad, are you? Yes, you're next on my screen. Whereabouts are you?
Yes, I'm calling from Jordan. Actually, it's almost midnight, 11 something, and I'm the director, creator, and editor of Endline series from Jordan. I hope you will watch it later on.
There we go. Goodness me. So we're all at weird times of the day, depending on whether we're night owls or not at the moment. We're either thriving or surviving right now. I will say I'll say at the end where I am and what's going on. But we'll go to Tricia next. Tricia, where are you? And what's
Well, I'm in the brighter Australian city of Sydney. So I'm also calling from the future. It's 8 a.m. and I make a series called 30. And we're in for season 2 for New York Web Fest this year. But I was at that 2017 New York Web Fest in New York, and it was so bloody great. So sad to not have an excuse to go to New York this year. But Ahmad, I'd say inshallah next year maybe we can all be in New York next year.
Inshallah.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Let's just keep throwing that out to the universe. And Daniel, who seems to be last on my list here, if I go in the way I've just gone, whereabouts are you and which series are you involved with?
Yeah, I'm based in Toronto. Worked on the series Cam Girlfriend along with Ethan. And so I directed the series and I was one of the producers. And we worked, Cam Girlfriend.
Cam Girlfriend. See, there we go. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. We are all in different time zones. I'm in Melbourne. So, yes, hence Tricia's little dig about being in Sydney. Yeah, we're having that. Okay, anyone who is not Australian, there is a real rivalry between Melbourne and Sydney, but Tricia and I are not going to keep that going, right? No, we're not going to do that today. No, we're not, because we're all in this together. But yeah, we won't. But there is a rivalry, hence the comment. The reason it's dark here in my place is that I'm in an apartment block that the sun won't hit me for another hour and a half, probably. So I look very pasty and ghost-like right now, and I'm well aware of that looking at the camera, so I apologize. I'm not unwell, I promise you. It's just the light's terrible, and I'm really only getting the light off my camera, off my computer right now. So yeah, I apologize. And see, we've got sun going on in Canada with Ethan.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to figure out the lighting here too. But I'll let it jump.
I know, right? Just, it is what it is. We are all in our homes, which of course is the bonus, I guess, to us being able to do this, is that we are able to come from our homes and have these conversations. But I think so great for everyone now that they all know which series you're actually associated with, which, most people who have done the homework will know, but not everyone has time. So that's good. So really, I think what I want to do for first question, because we have all come from very different countries as far as how web series are treated or perceived or even funded and made. I mean, I think we'll have basic principles in the filmmaking aspect, but there are going to be things that will be different country to country as to how the web series community is perceived and what kind of support there is. So I'd just be interested to throw out, and I'm obviously, to keep us sort of, talking over each other, I'll throw it to individual people to start the conversation. But let's start with you, Saul. As far as the UK goes, what is the web series scene like over there for you guys? And is there support on the ground financially or with resources or whatever for web series creators? How is the medium scene in the UK?
I think it's starting to build. I mean, I've done series of my own going back, much shorter ones. And I think, especially the past couple of years, it's something that's actually taken a bit more seriously. And I think funding is starting to appear, but the funding seems to be for the very high-end web series, things that are connected to major production companies or major TV channels. I know Sky puts a lot of money into, kind of like funding very well made web series. But I think it's starting to be taken a bit more seriously, but it's still in its infancy, in comparison to short films that there seems to be a plethora of funding for. And then that, obviously, some of those get made into features, but web series trying to either get viewers for it or trying to get that to pick up funding to make into a full series, that's still in its kind of, unless you're a young YouTube star, and they like that you've got millions of subscribers, that's still, I think, something that we need to get to. But the quality is definitely, in the past 2 years, the quality of web series, equals that of TV shows, I think. Just some amazing work.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's probably a common factor across the board, which hopefully we'll discover, but that's my suspicion, is that even when the funding isn't there, people are still finding a way to produce the quality, which is something we probably can have a chat about as well. So if I go to you, Ahmad, as far as what's going on in Jordan, what's the scene like there for web series creators and the medium itself? How's it perceived by the general public, by the industry?
Well, I think first of all, web series is not very common in the Middle East. The first, I remember the first web series that I knew before was back in 2010. It was made in Lebanon, I think, one of the very first web series called Chankabut. And then there was one maybe in 2015. And recently the one that we created, so it's very, very few web series that was like a series that was structured for web. Of course, there is lots of TV series, but we're talking about web-based series, and it's very hard, first of all, to find stories that will be funded from donors or production companies or any other funding partners. I think most of the focus now is in short films and features. Netflix is going in the Middle East recently, so there are lots of TV series or Netflix series that is going on. But it's very hard actually to find web series in Jordan and also the Middle East.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you think that's because the medium's not seen as a legitimate medium necessarily, or something that people feel they're going to make money from? I mean, I always find that usually an excuse as to why things are not supported in certain countries. Or is it just that it's just so alien an idea that it's not yet taken hold?
I think it has two components. First of all, the technology that, Netflix or any other Amazon Prime or whatever, it has been in other part of the world for so long. But in Jordan, we don't have actually medium or platforms to have that one. And also, of course, it was seen as a different medium that people are not familiar with. And I think also maybe technical issues that will be also involved. Internet speed is not really great. You don't have it everywhere. So there are lots of issues that are, in the face of the web series industry in the Middle East, I think.
Yeah, no, and that is, that's all very good points as well. We do tend to take for granted that you have the internet everywhere, but we don't yet. And yeah, so that definitely would be a barrier, I think, for certain people as well, to understand that you can actually watch things online like that when you don't have that access. That's fascinating to think about. So I was going to say, Daniel and Ethan, I mean, obviously we'll start with Daniel because we started with Ethan in the intros. I do know a fair amount about the Canadian scene, but I'm always interested to know what's going on there at the moment. So how do web series get perceived in Canada, and how are they supported over in Canada at the moment?
Yeah, I think in Canada we're very fortunate. There's quite a few kind of funding bodies as well as some private grant systems in place that support short form and web series. So that is something that Ethan and I took advantage of, for example, for our series, and it's something that I know a lot of web series are able to take advantage of. It's extremely competitive, but it has definitely helped to push the quality of the series, I think, coming out of our country. And there's some that are specific to provinces, and then there's some that are open to all Canadians. And then there's also tax credits, or there's an ability to get money back if you expend a certain amount of money in production labor in the country. That goes for all entertainment, but it does apply to web series if you have a proper distributor or proper broadcaster. So as a country, we've started to embrace it and treat it a bit in some of the longer form systems. So as web series creators, we're able to access some of the same resources and funding opportunities as some of the longer series.
That's interesting about the tax credits.
Mm-hmm.
That is actually a really good system. Don't think we've got that yet in Australia. Tricia and I can talk about that in a second, but that's really, actually, that's very good. That's actually probably the best scenario so far that I'm hearing. Ethan, did you want to throw any other comments into the mix about the Canadian scene at the moment?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add, it's interesting. So there's a lot of places to find money to create the content. Still, you find it's difficult to find like a good home for the content. There's CBC Gem, which is great, which is like a digital platform by the CBC, which is really great. But other than that, it's just still finding a really good distribution platform still seems to be difficult. Like we put ours out on YouTube, which has been great, but it'd be nice to find other places to put the content. But yeah, I think Dan laid out the Canadian terrain pretty well.
Okay, yeah. I mean, look, I think there's always going to be one thing, isn't there? There's always the one thing that's not quite been conquered yet. But I think that's fascinating to hear. I mean, Canada clearly have been supporting their people well, and I know it's competitive, but at least the opportunity is there. And I mean, and well done to anyone that accesses that finance. But I think that, the old distribution nutshell, we all fight with that one. Tricia, what did you want to share about the Australian scene?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I'm really wishing I was Canadian right about now.
That was my thought too, yeah.
That sounds great. Yeah, funding's quite tricky. I think it sounded a bit similar to Saul in the sense that they're good at funding really the projects that already have like 1 million views on. I remember having conversations about this. When you don't get your views to 1 million, and it was just really tricky. We haven't had any with government funding, and we had a few seasons and obviously good supporters that helped fund it. But we did get a grant through Creative Partnerships Australia, which is not government, but kind of government. It's like funded by one of the state governments in a roundabout kind of way. And that was all we could get. Funding is really, really tricky here. And I think it probably goes back to distribution and what you were saying, where I think they just don't know what to do with web series of a certain level, and they don't know where it's going to go. So unless you're on YouTube and you have a million views and they can see that and they know that's got an audience, then they don't really want to take a chance on it. So yeah, it kind of comes back to the distribution stuff, I think. What about you, Sally? How have you found it?
It's interesting. Well, I mean, I didn't say that at all. I didn't introduce myself at all. How rude. In the fact that I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I'm a director. I'm also the creator of Shakespeare Republic. So we're now in our 3rd season. We had a 5-year gap for this exact reason. Well, I say 3 years really, but it, we've been going for 5 years, had a 3-year gap. We did season 1, we did season 2, and then we went, right, we want finance because this is crazy and we also want to go bigger and better. And look, I'm not saying the doors aren't open, but also the amount of paperwork and all the rest, which is fairly standard for any screen body when you want money. You need to have producers in place who can navigate that successfully for you, for starters. But again, we don't have the 1 million views. We've been very, very blessed with the amount of recognition we've got on the circuit for the series and the awards that have been won, etc. But that still doesn't quite cut the mustard to a degree. We've been lucky that we found distribution with Ozflix, which is an Australian streaming platform, and they are actually also now have come on board to be our exec producers or to commission season 3. But again, that involves, going out and getting the money from other bodies. They aren't like Netflix, unfortunately. They don't have, $4 billion sitting in their coffers they can just throw at us. So we are going to have to make up a lot of the budget from elsewhere. But that sort of does help to a degree. But it's still, I mean, look, I know I've got plenty of friends that I know in the business here in Melbourne, particularly, who've been funded in one way or the other through screen bodies. But I think I do see many more that are doing what you're talking about, Tricia, which is you do the crowdfunding, you go through Creative Partnerships Australia. We were also a match project 2 years running. Well, there was a year or 2 gap in there, but we've done it twice now where the federal government will match up to $5,000 of whatever you raise in crowdfunding, which essentially doubles your money. So it's a little bit more piecemeal, I think, than what Canada's got going. But at the same time, I know Canadian filmmakers as well that, I'm sure that both Ethan and Daniel have done this, have crowdfunded as well to sort of also supplement what's, especially in the early days of doing a project or early days of the career. But yes, I'm also seeing very established filmmakers still crowdfunding and not necessarily getting the money over here. So it's a little... it comes down to the project. And if you have a bazillion viewers, great. It's almost, writes the ticket for you. If you don't, it's a bit harder. But I think it's getting more support as we go. I'm seeing more interest, particularly from places like Screen Australia, which is our federal screen funding body, who are definitely, having looked at the current COVID situation, have suddenly gone, I think web series people are probably going to do more at this time because of the fact that they're more innovative, which we tend to be, and also more flexible because we're usually not a cast of 40 and a crew of 120. We can respond a bit faster. So yeah, and the other thing too, I mean, I just did my recent season, which is in New York City Web Fest, which is why I'm here with all you lovely people this morning, which we shot entirely in lockdown. So we did it all through rehearsing and directing through Zoom while the actors filmed themselves on their smartphones. So I directed them all through in real time through that. 24 episodes because I'm insane, and all done and done with actors all around the world. So we have actors based in the UK, based in America, based in, I think we have one that was in Canada at the time, one who's in Israel, and actors here in Australia. And that was crazy, and I'm still editing because we still haven't quite finished. We just finished filming the last one a week ago, but I've been doing that since March. But even so, even that's an innovative way of doing it. By the time I went to Screen Oz to say, hi, I've got this project and this is what we're doing, they just went, we've spent our budget, we can't actually help you. So that is the other problem, is that when funding bodies are not properly funded themselves from the respective governments, there's only so much they can do anyway. But yeah, that's interesting. I think, okay, cool. Well, having said how I've done things, so we did ours again on crowdfunding and Patreon and God knows what else, donations. Having said all of that, how have people actually gone about funding and putting together the projects that they have here now? I'm going to start with Ahmad, if that's all right. And am I pronouncing your name correctly? I don't know if I am. Please correct me.
It's fine. I mean, it's okay. My name is Ahmad, but it will be hard in English.
So rude.
So Ahmad, it's fine.
I'm so rude to do that. Apologies.
Really okay.
But how did you go about putting your, sort of the budget and everything else together for your project and bring all those elements together to make it happen?
I think it's a great question because we are in this web series. We had several unique issues, let's say, or stuff. First of all, it's the first NGO-based web series. So actually, the main topic about the series is based on real events. And the project that was funded, this web series, it's a European fund, so European money that was supporting a social cohesion project running in Jordan, concerned about Syrian and Jordanian host communities and refugees. They had a communication visibility requirement, and instead of doing documentary short films, we decided to create something unique, something that will last for another 4 or 5 years, and that will be great for the youth to overcome their obstacles and create a different narrative in Jordan. In the Middle East now there is lots of refugee issues and lots of obstacles that the youth are facing. And because of this project, there was a kind of real stories that is happening in the program. We decided to take these stories and convert them to fiction, and created a drama series that is built on the basics of the main concept of the program itself. Actually, there was, of course, money, not a big amount of money, of course, but there was some place to play around and get some money that will be good enough to create 10 episodes, 10 minutes each. It's almost like a fiction feature that is the story is a bit different from the usual documentary style or fiction style. And then it's also, as I said, kind of the first NGO-based web series in Jordan. So we are opening this field and hopefully in the future. And we are trying to gain also more funds in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think again, breaking ground over there, is that something that you think will help get people in? And again, interesting, the money's come from Europe rather than from within the Middle East. Is that something that you think would continue going forward into other seasons, into other series that you might create? Is that something that potentially is open to you in the future again?
I'm working in an NGO called Generations for Peace, and this is an NGO that has been working in peace building for several years, and has also remote offices and projects in around 50 countries in the world. And this is like a first step in this field, in the web series field. Hopefully in other projects that they will apply for, and in other projects that will be targeting youth, there will be more seasons or more series hopefully coming through. I think because of the lack of the governmental fund, and the fund that, as I said in the beginning, is focused on short films or feature films, we don't have this space to go in web series. Maybe this will be a different approach to funding and finding partners who are willing to support not for profit, of course. It will be for not profit. It will be for non-profit, but it will try to convey a message that we are trying to reach in the Middle East.
Well, I think that you have more than a good chance of that happening, fingers crossed, but I think you do. And I think that's another great example, actually, of how web series can do things that maybe mainstream television can't. Is also not only just tell stories that we mightn't see on a normal mainstream screen, but also working in that way to highlight those kind of issues and what's going on in a way that hopefully people will relate to and see themselves in, which I think is obviously, part of the idea of it, is people being able to go, oh, that's actually what it looks like from the outside. Let's rethink how this actually all plays out normally. But I think that's fascinating, and I'm glad to hear there's at least some kind of funding coming in for you, even if it's not within your own country. But the fact that it is support from outside, very interesting. Oh, you got me really thinking about that now. I'm really pleased to hear that that's actually happening for you, because I think it'll be. It's a great series, but also it's a really important series, I think, too, with what it's got to say. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Saul, what's the deal? How did you do what you did in the UK? Because you were talking about, obviously, funding wasn't exactly rich around for you.
Yeah, I was listening to Ethan and Daniel, and I was like, oh my God, I want to move to Canada. There's many other reasons I wanted to go there in the first place, but there's definitely a lot of funding for short films, for feature films, and we've got the Arts Council as well, which is amazing if you produce theatre work. But web series currently there's not much. So I was fortunate enough from my acting career to, if I do anything larger like a BBC show, or if I do a particularly large brand commercial, then I've just siphoned off that money and then made my own stuff. It's kind of like you do that so you can create your own work. And so when the last kind of larger gig came through, I was like, well, what do I do with this? A deposit for a house? No, I'm going to make a web series instead. But also nowadays, it doesn't cost, especially if you do as much of the grunt work yourself, the directing and the producing and all the editing and everything. Get a good DP, get some fantastic actors to make you look good, great sound guy. It's with digital kind of like technology, it doesn't cost as much as it used to make something that looks amazing and is, like I said earlier on, in keeping with kind of like a TV quality. And I think that if there's a good story and there's a good crew on board, that's what will hopefully end up selling the show. So that's how I've made mine. I've been very fortunate, and I kind of went, okay, now's the time. Wait for the money to trickle in, and then just make it before it disappears from the bank account.
Right. I think that is a common thread through many careers. Yeah. So I'm going to go out and work in another gig, hopefully within the industry, maybe not. Maybe we're doing also an office job or whatever, but that'll pay for this suddenly this idea I'm now obsessed with putting on a screen in a web series format.
Exactly. I feel very fortunate to have an acting career. It's very nice that that's there, but the fact that I can then siphon it off and make something that maybe would normally not get made in the mainstream is nice to know.
Well, that's what I think is interesting, and I think we're seeing a theme of stuff that may not normally get picked up in the mainstream as a long form thing. It could, but also works well in that sort of in the web series vein, in either shorter segments of episodes, or even if they are longer. I mean, we do have web series now that run 30 minutes or more an episode. Technically, anything that goes out on Netflix is considered a web series, which I think is quite interesting.
It's very strange. Technically, it is on the web, so I'm like, I'm sure. But that's the beauty of like when you do make slightly more obscure stuff. The internet, there's a large niche audience for that kind of thing. I'm definitely in the vein of, if you know the show kind of Danger 5, which is Australian, which is just amazing, or Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, which British. There's a niche audience that kind of love that kitsch, kind of retro, bizarre, off the wall comedy. And on TV, I don't think there's enough viewers for that kind of, for that kind of work. But the internet provides all the weird and wonderful people to come and gather in one place and find that stuff out. It's the kind of stuff I find out. So, I'm one of the weird and wonderful, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, come on, who else is going to put bite-sized Shakespeare on a mainstream channel? That's not going to happen. I'm in exactly the same boat there. I'm like, yeah, that probably won't be a good sell to any of our major networks here unless they're just looking for filler, which, can happen. And I used to work for BBC in production, also on screen for BBC. So, but because I lived in London, so this is the other reason why I've got great interest in the London scene, in the UK scene. But BBC would have been at that time the only other place, and it would have been used just as filler to put in between programs.
The 2 a.m. slot, there's always that needs to be filled. So
right, but it still would not have been seen as its own entity. So I think, and you're right. If you're niche enough, you find the audience. I mean, we've certainly
which is not the case for everybody. I appreciate that, but when it's when it's just a slightly weird premise of a show, then fingers crossed that you get an audience for it.
Right, absolutely. So Tricia, I was going to say, you with 30, how have you been putting that? I mean, you always touched on part of that. We've obviously started touching on audience as well here. I mean, how have you found? Where have you ended up broadcasting, and what's been your experience of putting the whole project together, and then also, I guess, finding where the audience is?
Yeah. So in terms of funding, season 1 was, well, it's funny, the whole find your money and let your money trickle in first, Saul. And I wrote that on my notepad, which I feel like should be a logical thing. However, no, didn't do that. So the first season, we started doing it, and then I had to fund it retrospectively. And we did with a little bit of crowdfunding and just some of taking some of my own money, and my dad put in some money. He's in the show, and he always wanted to be an executive producer when he was a kid. So he loves it. He loves it. And so he put in a little bit for season 1, and then for season 2, I was like, no, not doing that again. So we applied for the Creative Partnerships Australia thing, and we got that matched funding, which was great, because before that, and you're right, Sally, I think like Screen Oz are getting more and more interested in web series, and were at the time, and were speaking to us about funding. However, we had to fund it and pay everybody award wages, plus loading, plus, oh my God. So by the time we paid every single person who set foot on 30, it was going to be, upwards of like 200 grand. And I was like, holy macaroni. Like I don't need that much money. And then when you get into that amount of money, they want people who have way more experience, right? So it's this like catch-22. And I was like, but I just don't even need all that. So when we got the Creative Partnerships Australia thing, I was like, this is, it's obviously a lot less money, but that's great. That's fine. And we sort of said goodbye to the Screen Australia opportunity, and we crowdfunded. And we got like 21 grand in crowdfunding for season 2. Between that and the 10K from Creative Partnerships Australia, and still like a little bit from me, we made season 2. And I was like, this is all we need. And it's very frustrating, because I understand that as a government body, they've got to have those like measures in place to make sure people are paid fairly. But I'm like, I know these are friends, and we just want to get paid something. Like, we just want to be able to work. And if we can't get this, then we can't work. So I just feel like there's got to be more flexibility with that model. And then, in terms of audience, it's definitely been a tricky one for us. I think what Saul said about niche audiences work really well on YouTube. And I remember going to VidCon in Melbourne, I don't know, was it 2017? Not sure. And they were talking about niche audiences on YouTube and how like that's really effective. And 30 is not a niche audience sort of show. So plus YouTube for season 1 just was not that great. Like, I think for a narrative series, a dramedy, it's not sketch comedy. It's obviously geared towards women in their 30s. It just wasn't quite the right fit. Plus, we have some sexual content that we got almost kicked off YouTube at one point, and I had to appeal to get back on and to say that it was art and not porn. And okay, this is sounding really sexy. It's not. This is not Cam Girlfriend. You know, I was watching that last night. This is so just, you know, a little bit of bouncing in a bra. And yeah, I had to appeal to get us put back on. So I'm very hesitant to go back on YouTube for season 2, and I'm just trying to work out, and I'm going through just numerous pitches of the model at the moment. And I'm keen to hear more about Ozflix actually, Sally, so we might have to chat later. But yeah, still trying to find the right audience.
Yeah, I think that is, no, I hear you. I think that is part of the problem over here particularly, is that, you know, people say things, well, we've got networks, obviously we've got Netflix, have been making steps into the area of Australian content, not interested so much in short form though. So, you know, they've experimented with that, but I'm yet to see them fully embrace it. So I don't think that's even really on their radar fully. So that doesn't really help the short form content creators. And then you have Stan, who is one of our other streaming platforms here, that kind of go, yeah, we just want kind of big budget, lots of money, dramas and stuff. That's what we're going to go for, long form. And you go, okay, well, that cuts us out of that too. Our other networks, TV networks, are taking short form, but unfortunately not often paying for it, which I just find extraordinary. But yeah, they kind of go, yeah, we'll put you on our digital platform for free, and that'll help you with views. It's, you know, it's like the old exposure argument, and you kind of go, yeah, that's actually, you have money. Like, what are you doing? You could at least pay a license fee. So we do struggle from that perspective here. But I think 30, you know, again, it's not necessarily going against you that you have a broader appeal per se. That's still a niche audience that you're going for.
I know. Well, yeah, I would have
It
thought
is.
so. And it's still, we just get caught in this, yeah, a little bit not enough of everything, a little bit not niche enough, but then also still niche, not broad enough, but then not, you know, quite diverse, but not diverse enough. It's an interesting kind of position that we're in. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll get there. We'll find the right home for us, but we're just kind of going through that. Now, I may duck out of shot for a second just because I think my computer's not plugged in. So when you see, like, yeah, that's where I've gone. I'll be right back.
No problem. You go deal with that. So while you're doing that, because it does bring us really helpfully to Ethan and Daniel, because with Camgirl, that is, of course, very much for a certain, you know, it could be seen for a general audience, but you've had to, distribution platforms would have had to look closely at where that would go. So if I start with Ethan this time, well, whoever wants to jump in first, of the two of you, to sort of talk about how this is put together, but also, you know, where did you end up? Where was it broadcast and streamed? That would be great.
Cool. Yeah. So we had the idea to do this. We thought that it could be sort of just, we thought the world of camming was like a really interesting world to explore. And that's kind of what got us excited about it. It's like, oh, there's this like a niche little world here which is great to like for storytelling. So Dan and I, we ended up together, we invested in a pilot that we shot in my old apartment. And I remember my roommate coming home one day, is like, what's going on here? And we shot the pilot, and then we put it online. It did well. And then with that, we were able to get, like, through the grant system, we were essentially be able to finance it through grant, the IPF, and through some tax credits. And then fortunately for us, we actually needed just a place. Like we needed a logo for all of the camming things to happen. So we contacted Chatterbait, the camming company, to say like, hey, do you want to do a branded content deal here? So it was the best deal in that they gave us some money just for us to use their logo. And it was just, so it worked out really perfectly. So
now that is interesting, because we kind of get into the realm in a way, therefore, of branded content.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. But it was the best branded content relationship, because they had literally no editorial control.
Right.
It was just
great.
Yeah, we were like, here you go. And it was just a logo, and we needed that for our show. So we were gonna have to make up some sort of brand anyway. So it just worked out really, really well for us.
Because that is another way. And this is why I'm, you know, so glad you guys are on the conversation. I'm sure Daniel can keep adding to this, but that additional branded content, the payment for brand, a la James Bond, is a way that we as creators need to also. I mean, we've been exploring that with our series with Shakespeare Republic as well, about how much can we get away with without compromising the creativity and the core values of what we're doing. How much can we put branded content into the series to find that as another revenue stream for budget?
Totally. What was really, I think, unique about this situation, it kind of elevated our product, and that it was just authentic. We needed it. And then also they were able to connect us with cam models that we'd use in different episodes when we needed to for some other cameo parts. So it just worked out really well for us in terms of, not in the opposite of corrupting it. It really just kind of elevated it for us.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds like an actually perfect match and a sensible move. Daniel, did you have any more that you wanted to add to that sort of that's aspect as to how that worked?
Yeah, sure. To kind of pick up off of Ethan there, it was a perfect opportunity for a brand partnership, and it was very important for us, again, to what Ethan said, to make sure that it didn't affect the creativity, that they didn't have editorial control, and so when we've spoken to other people about whether you can have a brand partnership and how that works, that's the most important thing we always stress, is that it doesn't affect the creative. That was also extremely important from a perspective with we had the Independent Production Fund was a funding body that we got first. And one of their rules, and it's the same with the tax credits, is it can't be considered an advertisement. It can't be considered advertising. So of course we didn't want to do that anyway as creative people, and as creatives, that's not what we were making. But in other examples, we also had a partnership with a company called We Vibe, which is a sex toy company. So it was one of those things where we were looking at the show and looking at the creative. Ethan and the writing team had already had scripts, and we were looking at it. What do we need for the show to make it better, where there's an opportunity to maybe have some free product or maybe have some money. And so it was a great opportunity. I worked on another series that was actually an NYC website last year called The Ninth. That was a baseball ensemble comedy that I co-created, and we looked for brand partnerships there, and we couldn't get it. Part of the reason why we were able to do that with our show, right now with Cam Girlfriend, is because it's a very niche subject matter, and it's an environment and a world that a lot of people don't talk about, and there isn't a lot of exposure to. It actually enabled us access to more people and more things that if we'd done a less focused, concept, we wouldn't have had, if you get what I'm saying.
No, totally. And that's a really good point, actually. If you're creating a series with potential brand partners that are overexposed to the general public already have so many options, yes, it would limit, I think, their interest. Again, we're back to that whole thing about what is web series, and many businesses are still trying to get their heads around that. So yes, niche again. It's interesting because we keep hearing that no matter what country we're from, niche is often king. That is the thing. If we can find the niche and that niche audience, that tends to open a lot more doors for us, which I find fascinating. Interesting. I mean, I'm thinking about what I did again with season 2 of Shakespeare Republic, and we had sponsorship from businesses who just gave us money to have their logos included in the credits. And also we filmed it, there was a hotel that gave us a bit of cash and free location, and also hosted, our opening and closing, the launch party, and then the actual for the season itself. And then we had another party at the end to show the trailer of the new season and all the rest of it. They were in to help gifts in kind. And I guess that's the other thing we shouldn't dismiss. As you say, it's really helpful to have a mix of that, and obviously those that want to put money into the mix as well. Interesting. I'm getting some questions coming through, which is exciting. So I'm just going to throw this open to whomever would like to jump in. But we've got this question. Hey, everyone. How do you feel your home country has influenced you creatively? Oh, that's a big question. Would anyone like to take that? You're all just going, come on, what? Go.
I might If anyone I know is watching this, I might, obviously I'm originally Scottish, but so it's hard to say how that's influenced me. But being in London, I mean, the whole place is just an influence. It's, as I've worked over the past kind of 15 years as an actor, the people you meet have that's what leads you down a path. Where I've ended up, I mean, I predominantly, like yourself, I perform Shakespeare. That's but in drama school, if someone had told me I did live improv mixed with Shakespeare, I would have never believed them. But through those people that I've met working for that, I've met film directors and producers that's got me to making my own stuff as well. I think that's why it's very hard to leave London, because it's what keeps me being creative. It's what keeps me, there's just a momentum to the whole thing that I know from people who live elsewhere and are trying to, be in the business in whatever form. That becomes harder because in actual fact, most of their contacts, most of their connections with making something still leads back to London again. I've often thought about going back to Scotland because, I'd just love to, but 20 years now in total I've been down here, the idea of, I don't know what I'd be able to do, and to be able to just pull on a talent of people, as much as there are people in Scotland who are insanely talented, they're harder to come by, I think, because London just seems to be a little melting pot of people who are wanting to make things, which is amazing. So, I mean, London, I think, it's just a big creative city. Sounds very cheesy when I say it like that, but it's.
No. As I said, I lived there 5 years. I trained there at drama school. I know exactly what you're talking about, and there's an energy about it. And I speak. Obviously, I didn't come from Scotland. Well, I'm fourth generation, so I'm not Scottish, of course. But coming from Australia to London, I mean, Melbourne is a very. Tricia, just close your ears for a minute. Don't hear me say this. Melbourne is a very creative city.
Don't start purple. I don't want to be the reason why you two fight. That's not fair.
No, we won't. But Melbourne and London are very similar in vibe as far as cities go. We're just a smaller version. But being in London, I totally hear you. I think that again, it's a big city. And so there's this incredible energy that comes with being there as well. And the people that create that energy that live there. I miss London. You talked about I'm getting homesick. I'm like, and I didn't even grow up there. Again, as you say, it doesn't necessarily mean where you grew up, but it's certainly where your career started to take hold. I think that does have a huge influence over what you do and your creativity. And I know that it influenced me hence why I'm doing Shakespeare in Australia, I guess.
I would like to say to Tricia, I was in Sydney in January performing Shakespeare, and I loved the city. Like, I loved the city.
What?
So does that mean you're on my
Look,
side?
again, I'm not getting into anything. I just think you both have valid points, and both beautiful cities in their own right. But I wanted to stay for longer.
Confession, I do love Melbourne. I do love Melbourne. It's got a great vibe. It's got great coffee. A little sleepier. I do love Melbourne. But yeah, Sydney, I'm glad you liked Sydney. It's very different. Like, Melbourne is really creative, very artsy. It has a bit of a rep for being a bit showier, I guess, and a bit more materialistic. And I just don't know if any of that's really true. It's very diverse. It's a big city, and there's lots of different enclaves. And I'm just going back to that, answering the question, hopefully. How does how does it feel it influences you creatively? Well, 30 is, it showcases Western Sydney a bit more. I have always lived in Western Sydney since I came to this country when I was 6, and I didn't really see much of my own part of Sydney represented on screens. And so it's definitely influenced me creatively and what I choose to write and to work on, and own. I like the idea of showing Western Sydney a bit more, and so I guess that has influence. Actually, it's something you don't really think about, really, but yeah,
it is.
No, like, I think about my culture and my background. I'm half Lebanese. And yes, thank you, Ahmad, for giving me a nod. I'm half Lebanese, and Western Sydney's got a big Lebanese population, and I always think about how my culture influences me, and it was really important to have that come through in the show with my dad on it, particularly, and throwing in some Lebanese proverbs and, you know, doing the rest of it, and just kind of having him in there was really, really important to me. But I never really think about Sydney itself and how that influences my show. But of course, Sydney is like the fifth character, the fifth main character in 30. So definitely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, look, I don't just do Shakespeare. I know everyone thinks that's what I do and that's all I do. I don't. I do other things, and I am actually a writer myself. What I find interesting, it's interesting you mentioned culture, because I do actually find, I'm just thinking about it, that Melbourne very much influences me, and I have two historical stories, both set in Melbourne, that I'm very interested in history. So probably hence the Shakespeare again, but two historical stories that are set in Melbourne, and Melbourne definitely is a character in its own right in those series, because they're very Melbourne stories, but they're from, you know, in one case 70 years ago, in one case 120 years ago. And also, I guess my own cultural background influences the other work. I mean, I have a feature film that's, you know, written and set in Scotland, for example, and I have a novel that's being written that's been set in that's sort of more the fantasy genre, but very influenced by my Scots and Irish roots. So I think it's a combination of both, maybe, would be my answer. I don't know. Let's jump to Ethan and Daniel quickly. How do you guys feel? Do you think that, you know, you are influenced by Canada with the work that you're doing? Do you think that you'd create the same thing if you lived elsewhere?
Yeah, I'd say I think about this a lot. I just hang out with like a lot of funny people. I think Canadians are just funny. So it's just like, it helps a lot when you're sitting having a pre-drink with people and they're all saying funny things and you just jot it into a notepad or whatever. So I think that really helps with my creative process. So just feel fortunate that just surrounded by people make me laugh a lot. I think that hopefully seeps into the work. They do say Australians and Canadians are very similar. I'm going to claim that one too for the Australians, but I'm sure Canadians are funnier. Every Canadian I know has got a very good sense of humor. I think it's like a coping mechanism. We know, like, sometimes if something's weird or hard, like always finding the humor in it, I think is kind of helps therapeutically, I find. So yeah, I think we do that a lot here. Yeah, absolutely. Daniel, do you feel that you're heavily influenced by where you are with what you do?
It's interesting. Ethan and I did not collaborate before this conversation about this, but I was going to say a very similar thing, that I don't think it's necessarily a geographic thing, but it's a comedy thing. It's a sensibility thing. A lot of people that we collaborate with and that we know are very funny. And yeah, if you're around funny people, I think there's a bit of a certain self-deprecating humor that comes a lot. And maybe that's because of our crazy neighbors sometimes. And thank you, NYC WebFest, for hosting this. Yeah, I think that there's definitely something about having the big American juggernaut above us. And, you know, I think in some other countries where you are very isolated, there's much more of a national feel. I think being North American is probably, we're, you know, as growing up in Toronto, my sensibilities are probably more like a New Yorker than like a person who lives in, you know, Alberta or Saskatchewan, another part of our country. So I think it's about that. But circling back, I think humor for sure is a very Canadian thing, and the type of humor that we like and we put out there, I think is unique.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that. And I think that's probably the point too, is that it's more about the culture rather than the country necessarily. Because again, as you pointed out, there are different cultures in each country too, and different approaches in each country. So it's really more down, I guess, almost to city rather than country itself. Ahmad, is there anything that you wanted to throw into the mix there about being over in the Middle East?
Well, I think I don't want to sound dramatic, but you know, being in the Middle East means that you have already lots of conflict coming on in your personality and your background, and of course, it heavily affects your creativity. Related to Shakespeare, for example, I already did Hamlet. I was theater actor back in 2007 in Jerusalem, and had Italian director who was producing the show. We went to Italy, so I was doing Palestinian Hamlet, let's say, in a way or another, that had already created a conflict between the character itself and the creativity that I already wanted to present to the audience. I think it's also similar to the web series that we are trying to do. I'm coming from a conflict situation, and being in this region, you see other people who already have different approaches to, I don't know, drama or comedy or whatever. Lebanese are in the region are very funny people, similar to Canadian, I don't know. But we already have this jokes in the Middle East. There is lots of great comedians who are going through this way. And I think really the area that we live in now affect the way that we deal with the world and the way that we create our own product and
well, I mean,
content.
clearly, yes, knowing that it's not exactly a bed of roses over there, sadly, at this point in time, would have its own influences in its own ways and affect things like sense of humor as well. I mean, that all of that, human beings being human beings, will deal with things as they do. I think this is possibly underlines for me, having heard this from all of you, how important it is that we keep maintaining our own voices in this particular medium and keep putting forward our own stories as much as we can, because quite often it's not covered by mainstream media in a way that speaks to others in that direct fashion. Sometimes it is. But I think quite often it does fall to us as content creators working in the web series, independent sort of, even with government funding, can still be seen as an independent outfit. But I think finding those stories that make us laugh, that make us think, that make us, cry, it's because it's personal for us. Therefore, it becomes personal for our audience. And that's how we find them. I'm getting the wrap up, guys. I think we might have to finish. So is anyone got anything else they just want to throw into the mix? You've got about 2 minutes if you want to say anything else before we wrap up this lovely, fascinating panel that I wish we could keep talking for at least another hour, but we can't. Anyone want to jump in?
Well, I'll just say thank you so much to NYC Web Fest, and that these festivals like this are extremely important, and from an international perspective and from a web series and digital series perspective, how important venues like this are, whether online this year and before this in person, to provide an audience and a window into this kind of content that's not getting the same kind of support elsewhere.
100% agree. 100% agree, Lauren. You're a star, as is every other festival director out there right now who's doing this. This is one way we do get the word out about our series and find those new audiences and connect with each other, which is a big part of the community.
It's really important. And one of the reasons why I wanted to come back on, I mean, I know it's getting late in some circles and early, is that in 2 hours we have another networking event. I don't know if anybody was able. Daniel, were you in last night? I'm trying to remember. Anyway, it was well received. It was like speed networking, and we were just being matched. It was a lot of fun. So that's starting in exactly 2 hours. And if you go onto the Eventive link, it's on a different website called Icebreaker. I will set the link up there now, just so you know, because last night people were like, is anybody there? And I had to send them the link, but I'll put it there now. But yes, thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate that. I feel like today's 2 panels, I was just telling the ladies that spoke earlier on the women's panel that these are the 2 panels that I sort of manifested. Like I saw in my head another international panel with Sally moderating like in 2017, and some of the ladies that spoke on the panel earlier, I saw that vision and got Kathleen to moderate that. So you guys are all great. I really appreciate this. Thank you. And I will see you hopefully online later and online for the awards tomorrow as well.
Yay.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
For joining us.
Good chat.
Thanks guys.
Thanks, hon. Bye.
Yes.